Good afternoon, good morning, whatever time it might be when you are watching this. Good to be back at part-time this weekend, and so going to be out this Saturday, so just recording this lesson ahead of time. Looking forward to being with you next month live. And so we're going to continue on talking about leadership today. We're going to talk about something that's very important for leaders. And as long as you're involved in the administration of a department, you're going to be involved in decision making. So you might not even be the pastor, but if you are overseeing it all, if you're a part of leadership, you're going to have to make some difficult decisions. And I know a lot of people don't care for this because when you make the decision, that means the blame goes on you if it goes poorly. So there's a lot of pressure on decision making, on being the one that makes those decisions, makes those calls for an organization or for a department. And so we want to talk today about how to do it effectively, because it's not always as easy. You don't always get the direct word from God about all the measurements of the ark and how it should be built. You aren't able to put a fleece out and get a direct yes and no on things from God. Some things God leaves it in our hands to make the decision, because we should be prayerful leaders, spirit-led leaders, and so we should be using wisdom. We should be gaining some knowledge along the way with some experience and be able to make some decisions on our own without having that great big booming voice from God every time about all the decisions that we have to make. And so some of the principles that we are going to cover today for problem solving is they are going to be ask questions first, then give answers. And it's going to be classify your problem and be systematic in your approach to problems. So ask questions first, then give answers. So the more questions you ask about a problem, the more likely you are to give a rational answer. So we need to ask those basic questions: who, what, when, where, how, and especially why. We don't want to make a decision unless we have answered at least 4 of these. If we are making a decision to start something new, we need to be able to answer these questions, because often it's because these questions aren't answered that tasks go unfinished, that goals go incomplete. A lot of people are making resolutions this time of year, and they've determined that they're going to lose weight. They're going to advance in their career this year. They're going to get up earlier, read more books, become a more well-rounded person. They're going to do all these things. But they've just come up with the big picture. This is the big goal that I would like to achieve. And so we can apply that also to our decision making. If we're deciding to start something new in an organization, we're going to start a new department. We have this need in the church, and so we're going to endeavor to reach this group of people, but we've not answered these questions. We're going to end up finding ourselves overwhelmed and unable to complete the task, because we need to be able to answer questions like who, what, when, where, how, and why. And those are very important questions to ask before we make that decision. If you're a new church plant and you're getting to the point where you need a Sunday school class, you need to be able to answer some of these questions. Who? So do you have students for the class yet? Well, you have the problem, so hopefully you can answer that part of who. But then, who is going to teach them? Which is often the problem that we come to as a new church plant, is that you have to find the teacher. So do you have someone that is available to teach? And if they're available, are they qualified? Can they pass the background check? Do they have enough Bible knowledge? Are they good with children? is probably another question you need to be asking. And you need to be asking where. Where are you going to have this Sunday school class? You might not have the space to have an adult class and a Sunday school class for the children at the same time. So you're going to need to be able to answer, where is this going to take place? If we can't have them in two different locations, then we're going to have two separate times. We're going to have a time for children and then a time for the adults and everyone combined, because we don't have the space. And so there are all these things that need to be considered before we make the decision to do something new. We need to be able to answer these questions, or we end up announcing to the church, we're going to start a Sunday school program. Everyone gets excited, but then you try to start it and it doesn't go so well, and it looks like you can't be held to your word. It looks like another flop, and people become discouraged afterwards, after you've excited them and told them that this is going to happen. And so in making decisions, you need to be able to answer these basic questions before you make the decision to go forward. So we want to be able to classify our problems. So this is one principle, is answering all those questions, and that's really good for when you've made the decision to set a new goal for your organization, to start a new department, something along those lines. But sometimes we have problems, and that's the decision making that we have to do, is we have to make a decision about a problem, a conflict that has come up. And so when that happens, we need to classify those problems. So first is, should you handle the problem or should others? We need to consider the chain of command. And a lot of conflict can be caused by stepping outside of that chain of command. And we'll continue to use Sunday school as the example, but if you as a pastor have someone come to you to tell you about another teacher that is absent, and you make the decision right then about what's going to happen. You tell them right then, okay, this teacher, we're going to have to sit them down for a while because they're absent, they didn't show up, they didn't let us know. Or whatever the decision might be, you make a decision right there on the spot based upon what this other person has told you about the teacher. Well, you need to consider a chain of command. Do you have a Sunday school superintendent in place already that should be making that decision? You should leave it up to them because you've given them the power and to make those decisions for you. Because that's the point of having a superintendent, having a department leader in the first place, is to be able to take some decision making away from you so that you can focus on what's most important when it comes to leading the church as a whole. And so that's one reason for considering the chain of command. The other issue might be is because you've set up the chain of command, that Sunday school teacher has already contacted the department leader to let them know that they couldn't make it that weekend. Or there was an interruption with the buses and the underground that weekend, and they're running late because of something that's happened along the way, and the superintendent is already aware of it, and you've stepped out of that chain of command, made a decision, and you didn't have all of the facts yet. And so you need to consider the chain of command before you begin to solve a problem that someone else should be making. So we have to resist the temptation to handle a situation that should be given to someone else. We need to classify the problem in that way. Who is it that should be solving this problem in the first place? That might be a good way to relieve some stress from you right there. You don't, maybe you don't like the decision making, and so that might be the way to alleviate some of it, is to appoint other leaders within your organization that can help make the decisions so that you are not making all those decisions yourself. You're not always having to be the bad person to make the decisions that other people don't like. And so while we need to be careful about not making decisions that we're not supposed to be making, at the same time we need to be ready to make those decisions when they are our responsibility to make. Okay, we don't need to always be like, okay, is there someone else I can dump this problem off on that could make this decision for me? When it falls on you, you need to be ready to make the decision. And you don't always need to insist on a committee, so that way the blame kind of gets scattered around. You're not always a bad person. You need to have some principles that you go by, and maybe I've thought out some scenarios of what you're going to do, how you are going to handle certain situations. That way, when they come up, you're ready to make that decision in the moment, and your organization can move forward without having to wait for the next week for the committee to come together and come to a decision. So also, when you're classifying your problems, when you're considering decision making, you need to consider if the problem you're facing is a new one or an old one. And this is where it comes back to, like Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. There's probably someone out there who has faced a problem similar to you. And so as a leader, this is where it is good to have some mentors, to have a pastor in your life, even if you are a pastor, to have your own pastor, to have leadership in your life that you can call on, some people with experience that have a few years doing the same things you've been doing. And so if you come across a problem, chances are you aren't the first one to encounter it, and so that would be a good moment to call an elder. If this is something that's new to you, you could call an elder, and it could be something that's old to them, and they could share with you their decisions, how they have handled problems in the past. Maybe they didn't handle it so well, and they can tell you about that, tell you what not to do, and a lot of times that is just as helpful and valuable as what to do. So it's helpful to be able to go to someone else. And we just live in a time of information right now, and so we really don't have an excuse to walk into something ignorant, given sometimes we are put on the spot and have to make immediate decisions. But if we have time to think about it, we live in a time when information is readily available to us. There are so many books, there are so many articles online. Many of the problems that we face today are not new ones. Someone else has faced them before, and so we can learn from someone else's experience. We need to be prepared for certain problems that could come up. Now, that doesn't mean we need to constantly be worrying, imagining that something is going to be wrong, but we need to consider what could go wrong. Because we don't expect tragedies to happen every week, but given years and years of having services, of having Sunday school and youth classes, just probability says you're going to have something go wrong eventually. So you need to consider things like what is your team going to do if there's an injury at the church? Are there people there that know where the first aid box is? Do they know what to do in the event of a fire? In the event that someone comes into the church to disrupt it, someone who doesn't have pure motives, what are you going to do in those occasions? If you have service even once a week for years, just probability says eventually you're going to have someone disrupt the service. What are you going to do in that situation? If someone walks in, maybe it's even a baby, maybe something goes wrong in the middle of the service health-wise. How are you going to handle that as a preacher who's up there, or as the pastor in helping the congregation during that time? What are you going to do in these situations that just chances are eventually you're going to have them come up? And so instead of being caught off guard, you can have a plan of action. You can be prepared and proactive for when those occasions come up. And so you need to have meetings with your team and discuss, okay, this is what we're going to do. If someone has a cut on the church property, we have first aid boxes here, and this is who is going to be responsible for making sure that they're taken care of. This is what we're going to do in a fire if someone comes in, whatever it might be. This is what we are going to do if there's a disruption, if there's an issue. And so we can't prepare for absolutely everything, but there are some things that are fairly common that we can be prepared for. That way when someone receives a cut, that it doesn't completely disrupt the service, that there are people who can help handle those situations. All right, so if an immediate decision is necessary, we don't want to make snap decisions. Don't often have to make a decision where you have 2 seconds to consider it. But you can usually take at least a few minutes to consider the problem. So fast decisions are not necessarily snap decisions. And some of this can happen through practice. Perhaps you've had the same problem presented to you over and over, and so you're able to make a decision because you've already thought about it, you've already had to handle it in the past. But no matter the situation, you need to be able to take time to consider all the facts before you make a snap decision, which is the difference between a fast decision and a snap decision. A fast one, you might already have the information. That's the difference. You have the information. You know the facts. You know the people who are bringing you this problem. You know all the background details. And so you are prepared. You are ready to make that decision. Other cases, you might not know the people who are bringing you a problem. And so you don't have the facts. You don't know all the things that should be considered in this scenario. And so you need to take some time to consider the facts, gather the details and the data, and consider what the best decision is going to be. Something you need to consider is, are you, in dealing with this problem, are you dealing with people or are you dealing with facts? And so if you're dealing with people, it's a lot more complicated. It's easier sometimes when it's facts. So when you're dealing with facts, if that's the root problem, it's a lot easier to gather the data. What are we going to do in this situation? A bill hasn't been taken care of. We don't have this amount of money. We need this amount. There are all those things that can be easily considered. But when there are people involved, people are unique, have a unique set of problems, and have so many factors involved in their life. And so you need to be able to gather all those details and not make an emotional decision in the moment when things are tense. And so if you're dealing with a decision that involves people, you need to be able to count to 10. You need to be able to take a moment, because oftentimes people can come to you with a situation in their lives. They're wanting you to help them make a decision. And they're coming to you very emotional. Coming to you because perhaps they need a personal bill paid. Maybe there's an issue with another family member, and they're coming to you crying, coming to you angry, maybe angry at you because they think you made a decision previously that did not help them at all in this situation. They want to know, what are you going to do about it? It's a moment where you need to take a moment and breathe a little bit and not make the decision right there in the moment. In fact, you might tell them that you need to gather all the information, and you aren't going to make the decision then. Just because someone tells you that you have to make a decision then doesn't always mean that you actually have to. If you're dealing with a problem-solving issue when it comes to dealing with people and you're giving counseling, oftentimes people will come to you and tell you they need the decision right now. They need the information at that moment. Well, who says that? Who says that you have to give them the answer right then? They're the only ones saying that. And you don't need to allow them to put that kind of pressure on you to make the decision then about what they need to do in their own personal life. It's their problem. You're willing to help them, but it is their problem and not yours. And so you don't have to make the decision in that moment, because you're putting yourself at risk of making a snap decision, making an emotional decision in the moment before you have gathered the facts. And so that is something that is so very important. You need to take time to consider the facts before you make a decision, and don't allow people to force you to make that decision in the moment. All right, so you need to develop a systematic approach to solving all problems. So there are a few things that you can do in approaching solutions for problems. So the first thing you need to do is to list the symptoms. So sometimes the evidence will only be indications of the real problem. So write them down, but don't decide yet. In a problem-solving conference, create a permissive atmosphere and try to make things open. Allow people to tell you about all the symptoms and all the things that could be done. So once you've gotten a list of all the symptoms, then you need to determine the real problem. So study that list, figure out which ones are valid and are critical, and ask them why they exist. What is it that caused them? So the issue could be that perhaps your organization is running low on funds and you depend on the giving of others. And so you could go through a long list of issues. You could say that people aren't being very giving. You'd say that people have been spending their time elsewhere instead of going to church and giving in the offering, that they're spending money on things they don't need, and so they don't have it in that moment. Or the issue could be that the economy is in a recession at the moment, and that's why funds are low. And so instead of making a decision when the first symptom is the church is running low on money because giving is down, the snap decision might not be to critique and criticize saints for not giving. The issue might be that people have lost their jobs in the church, are working fewer hours, whatever the situation might be. And so it's not always as easy as just looking at the symptoms. What is the real cause? And so we can find that out once we list out all the symptoms and get behind what is the real issue behind all of these symptoms. So we have to gather all the important facts. What is the history of the problem? What's the cost time factors of the problem? Performance, personnel, whatever it might be. Thirdly, we need to define our expectations. What do we want to gain by solving this problem? How will a decision help your main task? So solve problems in such a way that your decisions move you closer to your objective. And so you need to take time to pray about it. What do we expect to happen once we solve the situation? So fourth, temper your expectations with the facts. Are you being realistic? Can you accomplish what you want to in the amount of time available and with the amount of money that you have? And so going back to the Sunday school analogy, if you are needing to do something for the children in your church, you're a new church needing to start something. So let's start at the beginning. You're listing your symptoms. You have a lot of children in the church, and it's becoming disruptive to having a worship service. Maybe another symptom is that the children don't know a lot of the Bible and they need to learn it. That families are coming, but because you don't have a children's program, they don't feel like it's a great church for them to attend. So that might be part of the symptoms. Then you identify the problem. Okay, we have these issues, and root problem is. There are a lot of families here, there are a lot of children here, and we need something for the children. So what is that going to be? And so then you need to define your expectations. What is it that you want to get out of it? Well, we want to teach children the Word of God. We want to provide an environment where they can learn how to behave inside of a church service. We want to be able to have to limit distractions during our service, provide a church where families feel comfortable attending. And so then we need to be realistic about the facts. What is it that we are really going to be able to provide? And so it goes back to answering the how, who, what, when, where, why. Do we have the people to be able to do this? What is realistic here? We want the outcome of, okay, distraction-free services, children learning the Word of God, but do we have the people to be able to do it? Who is it that is going to be teaching the children? What are you going to do if that person is sick? Do you have someone else as a backup? Do you have substitute teachers? What happens if they pick up a job where they're going to be gone sometimes? And so you need to be proactive, consider all of these situations, and be realistic about it. So now we're going to consider various solutions. So compare expectations with the facts that could bring alternate answers to mind. So you could write down all the possibilities. What are all the ways that we could take care of these children on Sundays? Is there just a certain age group that causes a distraction during service? Maybe it's just the infants crying, and so maybe you don't have to start a whole Sunday school program. Maybe you just need a place for mothers to go with infants. And so consider that as a possibility. Do we need a separate Sunday school service during the worship service? Or can we somehow make our worship service easier for children to sit in? Can we somehow give them something to do during the service, make it interactive for them so they aren't bored during the service? Does it have to be done in separate locations, or can we do a Sunday school service in the same location before the worship service? So there are really a number of ways that you could go about solving your problem, and you need to be able to consider all these various solutions and then rank them by the process of elimination. Okay, we want to have 3 Sunday school classes because we have so many kids. Well, we only have 2 people that can teach, so we can only have 1 class. So that's out. Okay, you can go through like this and consider what is realistic, what are we going to be able to do, what is most effectively going to be the answer to the problem that we have. And then when you consider that, you can have a backup plan. Then what if your first answer doesn't work? Then you have another solution that you can go to. So what are you going to do now with your solution? Your decision must go into action. So plan how to communicate your conclusion to people effectively, and plan a way to motivate them to respond to your judgment. How are you going to give them the vision? How are you going to explain to them this solution to the problem? So if it is possible for people to participate in the decision-making process, this is going to be motivating to them. So for a big decision like that, it would be good to bring on a committee. If it's going to be something that affects everyone in the church, you can at least bring in key people to help in that so that you have the backing of key people. So finally, evaluate your decision periodically. So before it is too late to reverse what could be a wrong conclusion, provide an instrument to test your judgment to determine if that decision was a good one. And so we might have some lengthy ways to come up with solutions, but if you follow them, they end up being time savers in the long run, because it'll save you a lot of time if you don't make the wrong decision and have to redo everything over in the end. And so it saves time to take time to make a good decision instead of going through multiple bad ones. And so I hope this is helpful today, and helping you make decisions for your department, for your organization. And pray that God will give you wisdom as you make decisions. God bless you.